Okay, Vito Acconci. He was born in 1940 and he died in 2017. I will, okay, I have a text, I was afraid. I placed this picture of him as a young man on the right and as a young man of a certain age. I remember what Le Corbusier said at 72, there was a film made by BBC about Le Corbusier, and he introduced himself by saying, "I'm a young man of 72. Well, the man on the left, Vito Acconci, he was at the time when the picture was taken, a young man of I don't know what age. Anyway, let's read a little bit about him. So Vito Acconci, as you can see, born January the 24th, 1940 and died in April 2017, was an influential American performance, video and installation artist whose diverse practice eventually included sculpture, architectural design, and landscape design. His foundational performance and video art was characterized by existential unease, exhibitionism, discomfort, transgression, and provocation, as well as wit and audacity, and often involved crossing boundaries such as public, private, consensual, non-consensual, and real-world art world. His work is considered to have influenced artists like including Laurie Anderson, Karen Finley, Bruce Nauman, and Tracy Emin, among others. Acconci was initially interested in radical poetry, but by the late 1960s, he began creating situationist influence performances in the street or for small audiences that explore the body and public space. Two of his most famous pieces were Following Peace from 1969, in which he selected random passerbys on New York City streets and followed them for as long as he was able. And Seedbed from 1972, so he was 32 years old then, in which he claimed that he masturbated while under a temporary floor at the Sonnabend Gallery as visitors walked above and heard him speaking. And we are going to see some pictures of an empty gallery, essentially, because he was underneath a temporary floor. So let's read a little further. In the late 1970s, he turned to sculpture, architecture, and design, greatly increasing the scale of his work, if not his art world profile. Over the next 2 decades, he developed public artworks and parks, airport rest areas, artificial islands, and other architectural projects that frequently embraced participation, change, and playfulness. Notable works of this period include Personal Island, designed for Zwolle, the Netherlands, walkways through the wall of the Wisconsin Center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I'm afraid I do not pronounce well, and there is someone here who knows German. Maybe I should hesitate to pronounce. In Graz, kind of an island too. We are going to see it in Austria. Retrospectives of Acconci's work have been organized by important museums like this museum in Amsterdam, the Museum of Contemporary Art of Chicago, and his work is in numerous public collections, including those of the Museum of Modern Art and Whitney Museum of American Art in New York City. He has been recognized with fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation, and the American Academy in Rome. In addition to his art and design work, Acconci taught at many higher learning institutions. Acconci died on April 28, 2017 in Manhattan at age 77. So let's see some of his works. Well, as I read, he was initially a performance artist, and photography was important in his work. But I will show now some, before we actually review some of his works, and more in detail some architectural works, we'll see some pictures of the man. Just a second, please. You see him here biting himself, you know, and this is just the beginning actually, because he used to, you know, expose himself in even in storefront windows, biting himself, or in exhibition spaces, biting himself, all his body, you know. And of course you could say, why would he do this? But you know, self-inflicted pain always existed, you know, and not just for the saints. There is some kind of, anyway, the human soul and the human, you know, psychology is complex, and you know, sometimes we have guilt, sometimes we have remorse, sometimes we have angst. So, you know, in the act of inflicting pain on yourself, you perhaps find the resources to, you know, get rid of the dark feelings, so to speak. Here he is in a, you know, in a more advanced age, but I think he looks like a man who didn't go through life for nothing. He knew suffering. He fought with himself, with his limits, with the limits of society. And this is the role of the artist, I would say, in general. He did all kinds of things, truly a very experimental, open-ended, versatile art. Here he is at the Sonabend Gallery in New York City, you know, underneath the, you know, the temporary floor, you know, having the visitors of the gallery hear him, whatever he was, you know, whispering to himself. Anyway, while you know, devoted for that time of the exhibition to self-eroticism, here is a fragment detail. Well, if we are to call it a detail, I just allowed the picture as I downloaded it from the web, you know, as accidental, not accidentally, it's a large resolution picture. So that's how it was downloaded. You are going to see the whole picture, but you see the small notebook here in his pocket. And this is significant. This is, you know, an older man still carrying something like this in his pocket, like a student. And this is, I think, significant. Here is the picture with his adoring young wife from Argentina, a poet. I don't know when they got married, but you know, he was a man over 75, as you can see, looking rather, you know, worried. And his wife is looking towards him, as I said, with adoration. Anyway, it does seem they were in love. And here he is, you know, again, an older man, by this time already an architect, and I would say an architect with some success. And, you know, a larger picture of his face. I personally think we need inspirational figures, you know, if not mentors, you know. Maybe the word mentor is too ambitious, but I think we need, yes, provocative figures, inspirational figures who make us want to be ourselves, because in essence, it's about this, an invitation to be yourself, to be true to yourself, with whatever limits you have, with what longings you have, to be open, to experiment, to learn, to be alive, in other words. Now, this is that show at the Sonabend Gallery. I will see a picture called Seedbed. It's a picture actually with 4 pictures included. Essentially, you know, an empty gallery space, a famous gallery space. Sonabend was a famous art gallery in New York City. I don't know if it's still functioning. And he was, you know, hiding here underneath the, the temporary floor, and yes, making love to himself. And people who visited the gallery heard him, whispering or whatever. But later he said that this show almost ruined his career, because it was, I mean, the bourgeois would be, reluctant to easily accept anything. And he was a man who tried anything or everything. Here he is hitting, I don't know, his own shadow or the wall or both, like a man possessed. But more and more I feel that actually Vito Acconci had a high level of being genuine. Here he is. I don't know what he's doing. Again, this is performance art. Disfiguring himself with whatever was on that pot. So, would you have imagined, or would you imagine that this man actually became an architect, and a good architect? And you will see he built in Austria, in New York, in Tokyo. So, sometimes appearances could be misleading. But again, I admire someone who assumed so many personas and who experimented with his life and his body in so many ways. Look at him here. I think he's is not only a performance artist here, but also an acrobat. I don't think I would be able, or I would have been able to do something like this as he did it. But I think both postures are remarkable. So maybe Vito Acconci tells us, could we bring suffering into architecture? In his artworks, or at least in these artworks at the beginning of his artistic manifestations, he seemed to be very concerned with the suffering, with the pain in life. But his architecture is less so, and perhaps in architecture is not easy to express, what he was able to express in his acts of performative art. It's a subject that I think deserves attention. Maybe we could have a presentation here on Zoom, or a discussion about the subject architecture and suffering, or architecture and pain. This is not a subject that is very often addressed. Yeah, Vito Acconci. These are creations, he used his body as a medium to express emotional states and so on. And done with the simplest means, apparently. But again, I'm not sure that many people would be able to do what he did here. I'm certain I couldn't do it. Now, trademarks. This is the self-biting that I mentioned. Look at him here. And you see the artworks, I mean the traces of the artworks, the bites on his body. Again, would you imagine that this man would later become an architect? And he did. But why not? Again, I think his oeuvre is rich. Maybe the word oeuvre is too pretentious and too academic. Maybe a different word I should have used. But anyway, considering he also taught in academia, I guess it's acceptable. I found just before I started this presentation, this artwork by him, which I like very much, because it's, until now, you might have had the idea that perhaps this man was, that he was a provocateur was clear. But maybe you would have been tempted to think that there was some even cynicism there, exhibitionism, of course, tempted to see him in a kind rather, subjective, not subjective, maybe pejorative way. But this artwork, I think, testifies about his innocence. I mean, what artist today would draw that heart in the center of this, puzzled body, and also, showing, suffering, blood. So you probably know that in the Middle Ages, there are representations of knights or whatever, human beings taking out their hearts and displaying them kind of in a similar way, like here. And, this, I still consider this picture rather innocent. And because we do live kind of in a cynical time, to have the courage to show so clearly, so openly, the trembling heart at the center of the body, at the center of the being, this to me sends the message that this man was actually contemplating the cold realities of our time and longing for something else. And the longing was towards a more sensitive time, towards a time when the heart would occupy its deserved role in life. But there is the word brainstorm, but there is no the word heartstorm, when in fact the brain does not storm. It is the heart that storms. But we are still obsessed by the brain. That's why the word brainstorm and no word heartstorm exists. I like this work very much by Vito Acconci, and I discovered it just an hour ago or so. Now, Vito Acconci, he on Arch Daily, but I couldn't incorporate a video in this presentation. There is a video published by Arch Daily where Vito Acconci talks about why unbuilt projects are as important as the built ones. And maybe we should talk about this. Is it true? Is it false? I am tempted to think, I don't know. It's hard to compare or to make a hierarchy, to say one is more important than the other. I would put it this way. I think unbuilt projects are also important, because in the unbuilt projects, the thoughts and the imagination, the vision of the architect is present. And architecture is an intellectual art, is an art which manifests itself, sometimes, as Peter Eisenman thought, even better in the drawing than in the built work. Although, in my opinion, the real test for a building is being built, because being built and used for certain functions, confronted with the elements, confronted with the passage of time, confronted with the apparent movement of the sun on the sky, the building shows, I think, its true face, so to speak. But I think Vito Acconci is right. Unbuilt projects should not be ignored, because those unbuilt projects are important for the discipline we call architecture, for the architectural discourse. And I know there are people who consider the unbuilt projects paper architecture, but I think much of architecture is actually paper architecture. You can find a lot of paper architecture, so-called paper architecture, in Le Corbusier, in Frank Lloyd Wright, in Palladio. All the drawings, the idealized drawings that Palladio did of his buildings and past works that he investigated in the Roman Forum. What else are they? They are just drawings, but they mean something. They are important for architecture. So again, if you are interested, you can see on Arch Daily a video with, I didn't watch it. I was in a hurry to finish this presentation, but there is a video with Vito Acconci. I guess it's an interview with him where he states why unbuilt projects are as important as built ones, as the built ones. This is, I think, his proposal for World Trade Center, because this image accompanied the invitation to the video on Arch Lady. Actually, I didn't know. I would have been almost tempted to think that it was designed by Rem Koolhaas, but I think this is the work. I didn't investigate. It's possible it was the proposal of Vito Acconci. Here is him with some architectural scheme he did for a project, I don't know, a competition or something, but we are going to see built works. You know, this man who claimed that unbuilt projects are as important as the built ones, he also built. So we begin with showing the facade of Storefront for Art and Architecture in New York City. This was a competition that they won. They worked together. He worked together with Stephen Hall. I had the chance to be connected with Storefront of Art and Architecture myself from the very beginning. I participated to several exhibitions there. And at the beginning, I even had my own work shown in a one-man show at Storefront. Storefront became a very important experimental art and architecture gallery in New York City. And it was founded by Kyung Park, who was born in South Korea. And then, he had a partner, Glenn Wise. And then there were a few other directors, but a very interesting experimental place, an important art gallery, non-commercial art gallery, art and architecture gallery in New York City. So they did, Stephen Hall and Vito Acconci, they did the so-called wall machine, and you'll understand it's self-explanatory why it is called, or it was called the wall machine. Here you see the wall of the gallery completely shut off from the street. So it became a bulwark of resistance, a fortress, no opening towards the street. But even when these panels would open, it would still be a tensioned relationship with the street. So here we have the fortress, just, the door is open and there is a little bit of an opening here. But look now, with an installation by Mark Forn inside the gallery, which almost seems to outburst from the gallery. I think this wall machine, as it was called by Stephen Hall and Vito Acconci, or Vito Acconci and Stephen Hall, expresses in a way the present, and maybe it always was like this, the present conflictual relationship between the private and the public, between the artist and society. It's a tensioned relationship. It's not a easy relationship. Here is a view from the interior of the gallery. So there are no windows, there are no doors. There are these movable partitions, that panels that could be opened in many ways, and thus express the complexity of the relationship between art and society, between the gallery and the street, between the private and the public. And I think it was a very good project by Vito Acconci and Stephen Hall, and I'm happy it was realized, it was built. And you see the architectural language is definitely modern. It's provocative because it is kinetic, and yet, I mean, it has cohesion, but it also welcomes change or ad hoc interventions. And I think this is good. It was good. I think we need more galleries like this one in the world. And I think we need more artists like Vito Acconci, and more architects like Stephen Hall, and more architects like Vito Acconci, and maybe more artists like Stephen Hall. I didn't see artworks by Stephen Hall, but art is present implicitly in his architecture. So this is Storefront for Art and Architecture in New York City. You see here the interior becoming exterior with the shelves opening towards the street. Again, we saw actually this image, sorry, with Mark Forn, the rising star of the 21st century, as Patrick Schumacher called this French architect who now actually lives and works in New York, in Brooklyn, New York, and in the United States. It is not easy to be true to yourself and to advocate an art which is, you know, genuine, and which also assumes a critical discourse, a critical dimension. You cannot just be, you know, complacent and lower your head. You have to engage yourself in society, and this is what Vito Acconci did. And this is what good art and architecture do. And this art gallery, the way it was conceived and the way it functioned, expressed this tension, dynamic, continuously changing and you know, provocative relationship between the inside and the outside, society and art, and so on. Now, the island in the Moore project in Graz is perhaps the best known work by him in Austria. Here it is. He built it. The architect who initially, I mean, who in the past was, you know, tormented artist who was biting himself in public and doing other things. Here he is building. He built this in 2003, I think, when Graz was chosen the cultural capital of Europe. And I'm glad it was built. Now, how do you explain it? That an artist, you know, an extreme artist, so to speak, who didn't study architecture, was able to build something like this? But then, you know, in all the times, you had all the time artists who built, and very well. I mean, you know, Michelangelo himself, he was not an architect, he was a sculptor, but his architectural work is significant. Bernini also, and many, you know, they were not, it was a time then when there were no frontiers between art and architecture. And here we have a modern contemporary case also of an artist who crossed the frontiers, and there shouldn't be frontiers. And it shows clearly an artist can build. Here he is, Vito Acconci. You know, if you saw this work and didn't know who built it, you might have thought of, I don't know who, Massimiliano Puxas, or maybe even Foster. No, the self-biting man, Vito Acconci. Because an artist works with form. So an artist, and a good artist, doesn't just throw forms without any kind of legitimacy. So I think a good artist is able to build. Maybe not always, but sometimes at least. Some artists can do it. And Vito Acconci was one of them. What is remarkable is that Austria didn't ask him, you know, about his right for signature, nor the United States, nor Japan, where he did build. And we are going to see what very soon. Anyway, this work in Austria, I think, is very good. Okay, maybe its architectural language doesn't take us by surprise because we have seen, works with this kind of aesthetics. It's true, but it's still a good work, I think. Here he is, not far away from his creation, still looking a little bit tormented. The lonely artist. Well, later on in life, he did have his own office, and he had a few people who helped him, like young architects. But he didn't have, a big office and so on. This was a solitary man who was able, in time to be able to, have a small architectural practice. This is the model of this building, and I think again, it's good. Okay, this is the last image of this project. Now we'll go to the next one. Wave a Wall in New York City from 2006. So 3 years later, he did this work in New York City. Again, he was, playing with architectural fluidity and with a certain, kind of structure, if we have to call it so, with a structure which also had or has ornamental, attributes or qualities. Because, this structure, yes, it is structure, but it's also ornament and it's also enclosure. So it is in a way, pleasing Gottfried Semper because it is a woven enclosure, not with textile material per se, but it is kind of woven. Who taught this man how to do these things? But nobody. You could say God, or I don't know. I mean, who taught Hundertwasser to build? A painter. Nobody. But there are so many cases, of architects either self-taught or even untaught. I mean, after all, there are beautiful villages. A Dogon village in Mali, in Africa, which is a UNESCO heritage site, the whole village. Who taught those people how to build? Nobody. I mean, yes, there was a tradition there, but essentially, anonymously, they built, and they built well. They built significantly, and they built beautifully, often. Anyway, this is in New York City. And you see here, the rationalist would protest, because the rationalist would say, well, first of all, why should we have this? Why shouldn't this bench be completely, continuous and straight? Why do we have to have this curvature here and not just have, the regular grid and so on? But, change is part of life, and hazard and unexpectedness. The things are, life is not just reason. As in that artwork that we saw with the heart at the center of that human profile, as Blaise Pascal said, the heart has its own reasons, which which reason does not know, or the mind does not know. So maybe the heart wanted this, capricious as it is. But I think it's important, to have this so-called accident here. It's not a big thing, but it is, you look at this part and it's different from this one or this one or this one. And this difference matters. Okay, now we go to a Fence on the Loose in Toronto from 2012. So he built this when he was 72. He died at 77. Rather interesting, I would say, I mean, it's not Art Nouveau, but it's, tormented and tormenting. It reminds me a little bit of what Enric Miralles did in Barcelona for the Olympic Village. I wish I had more pictures with this structure, because in my opinion, it's a good work, and I almost see him in this canopy, this entrance. It's not a big thing, in terms of dimensions, but it is crafted, with care and with expression. It is expressing something, and I truly regret I don't have more pictures or a bigger picture with it, but maybe you can search on the web if you like it, for Vito Acconci in Toronto. Now we look at the last work he built, the United Bamboo, or is the last work that I present about Vito Acconci today, United Bamboo Tokyo store. It's a boutique, but I think now it has a different function. Anyway, it was designed for a store, for a boutique in Tokyo, in Japan. I don't know if he designed, well, I guess he designed the whole building, including the envelope, the carcass. Well, when a building is designed with individuality and personality and expression, people, I think, are attracted towards. And we see here, I don't know if this was the opening of the show or not, but look here. Look at these apparently useless things on both sides of the building, left and right of the the glassed part. What do we see here? Well, these are ornamental. They don't have a structural, raison d'etre, but I think Vito Acconci, without studying architecture, he knew something that maybe apparently, and only apparently, Adolf Loos would have been against. That ornament should be banished, Loos thought, although he himself didn't banish it. But this is a type of ornament, if we have to call it so, which is not the so-called, classical one. It mimics actually structure in a way, but capriciously, and I like it. I think it, the skin of a building should have more than just the blunt, flat surface without anything on it. And the interior, it's a store. What can we say? But when you think about where this man came from, from masturbating under a floor at Sonaben Gallery to designing a store in Tokyo, it seems he came to terms, to an extent at least, with society, with life, and even with commerce. Was this a good thing? Is it a good thing? I don't know, but what can you do? If you want to build, you have to assume certain levels of dialogue with society. And since our raison d'etre in this world, in today's world, is to shop, then a store is inevitable. Maybe Barbara Kruger was right. I shop, therefore I am. And if I do not shop, I do not exist. I die. But anyway, Vito Acconci, the avant-garde, protesting artist, here he designed even a store. Other images of the store in Tokyo. And this is the last image about this artist, Vito Acconci, on the occasion of his birthday. He died 5 years ago, but was born on January 24th. I'm sorry. He did some works for parks. This is for, is it for children? I don't know, but I think it's an interesting work. You know, people can gather there, you know, it's an amphitheater in a way, in open air, and stare at this face, which is actually his face. But his face is also my face and other people's face. It's in a way, it's an invitation to contemplate who you are, or to ask yourself, who am I? Or to ask the questions that Paul Gauguin asked, you know, in the 19th century. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going?